Thank you for joining this session. This is Nairametrics Energy Sector Industry Outlook, and the theme of this session for the month of April is harnessing Nigeria's energy sector to supercharge our economic growth. And I know a number of people would agree with me that the energy sector is actually one of the pivotal sectors or industries in driving growth in any economy. And Nigeria is not an exception. Today, we have a depth of panelists today who would help us engage in these conversations, and I'll try to just read them in no particular order. The first we have here is Professor Yemi Oke, a professor of energy, electricity law, and regulation at the University of Lagos. Professor Yemi Oke was born in Abeokuta, Ogun State, Nigeria. He attended Popular Baptist High School, Saje Abeokuta. He also has had his master's and PhD in law degrees from Osgood Hall Law School, York University, Canada. He also had his law degree from the University of Ilorin, Nigeria, and a Bachelor of Law from the Nigerian Law School, Abuja. He specializes in electricity, energy, natural resources, and environmental law. His practice interest also extends to global corporate law and commercial litigation. He was at various times in the course of his legal career the best performance award winner, Department of Public Law, University of Ilorin, Nigeria, best performance award winner, Department of Private and Property Law, and was also awarded several prizes in other law subjects in the same university. For his master's, he was awarded the prestigious York University Scholarship for Academic Distinction and Peter W. Hogg Award, the Osgood Hall Law School, Canada. And I think if I continue on these, I will have to say a whole lot, but I think I will just move on from here because there seems to be a whole lot of accolades. So welcome, Professor Yemi Oke, to this session. It's great having you here. We also have here joining us Mr. Olabode Shoumi, is the CEO of Captree Limited and Chairman Hydrogen and New Energy Committee of the Nigerian Gas Association. I'm a member group of experts on gas of the UNECE, that's the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Mr. Labode holds a bachelor's degree in engineering physics from Obafemi Awolowo University. His academic journey delved into researching compound semiconductors and materials used in flow mechanics. He ventured into various professional domains, including consulting at KPMG, business and technology research at He Limited, and event management at High Tech Africa. His versatility extended to freelance writing for esteemed publications at Business Day and the Guardian newspaper, covering topics such as internet-based and e-commerce enabling technologies. Transitioning into strategic marketing and media relations roles at Ericsson showcased Olabode's adaptability. He spearheaded marketing efforts in West Africa, leaving an indelible mark on brand communications. Olabode's influence extends through various affiliations, serving as a consultant to legislative committees, vice chair of the Gas Power Study Group of the Nigerian Gas Association, and a member of the group of experts on gas to the United Nations Economic Commission on Europe. Co-owning Captree Limited and publishing Energy Today underscores his commitment to shaping the energy landscape. As a long-standing member of the African Business Roundtable, Olabode continues to contribute his insights as a consultant to legislative bodies shaping energy policy. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, Mr. Olabode. We
Good
also
morning.
have joining us, she's not here yet, but we'll go ahead, Ms. Chantel Abdul. She's the GMD, GCEO of Mojek International Holdings. Chantel Abdul is an international business executive, a serial entrepreneur, and a consummate businesswoman with over 15 years experience in originating, founding, and operating hyper-growth startups, onboarding companies across Africa, Asia, Europe, and America, traversing a plethora of sectors from power and energy to agriculture, and mining, real estate, and hospitality. Under Under her leadership, Mojek International has grown into the largest meter manufacturing empire, evolving into a conglomerate and an undisputed market leader in the industry. with diversified interest in the power value chain, spanning across power generation to distribution, manufacturing, supply, financing, and meter installation. Mojek International, short MI, is the largest manufacturer of electricity meters in sub-Saharan Africa, with an installation capacity of up to 4 million meters annually and a nationwide footprint of 80%, working with 10 out of 11 distribution companies in Nigeria and West Africa. With over 2 million meters deployed, Mojek Meters Asset Management Company has the largest supply chain technology, financing, and installation network for electric meters, as well as the largest DER, that's distributed energy resources, and renewable energy solutions provided in sub-Saharan Africa. Additionally, Mojek has the largest installation network across the country with a combined strength of over 5,000 installers nationwide, being the largest nationwide deployment of AMI, that's advanced metering resources, across the country. Last but not the least, we also have with us joining Mr. John Ugochukwu Uwajumogu, the special advisor to the President, Federal Republic of Nigeria on industry, trade, and investments. Mr. John is a partner with EY Ernst& Young and the energy leader for West Africa. He has over 20 years of advisory experience, primarily in the energy industry. He's a thought leader energy matters and has spoken at several plenary sessions and written several publications on topical issues on the energy industry. Other than Nigeria, John has significant experience working in the energy market in Houston, Texas, and Calgary, Alberta. He holds a master's in international affairs from the Fletcher School at Tufts University. He's also a member of the American Institute of Chartered Public Accountants. Key amongst his skills cut across due diligence, private equity, financial analysis, mergers, business valuation, financial modeling, corporate finance, accounting, management consulting, and the list goes on and on. He's now the special advisor on industry, trade, and investment to the President of the Federal Republic. Thank you for making this session, Mr. John Ugochukwu Uwajubogu. And at this point, I will leave the mic to Buade Ahime to go on with this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's always a pleasure to working with my team members. Thank you for all the introduction. I'd like to thank our invited guests for honoring us once again as we talk about the power sector. I'll just share my screen so that we can all see what the presentation looks like, and I'll be brief with it so that it sets out the context of what we'll be talking about today. Just a second, please. Church. Sorry, I'm having some technical issues. Okay, sorry, apologies for that. Welcome to the Nairametrics Energy Outlook 2024, Industry Outlook for 2024. Our topic today is harnessing energy sector to supercharge our economic growth. My name is Wadi Ahime. I am the head of strategy and public affairs at Nairametrics. I'll run through my presentation as quickly as possible, but we know that the energy sector over the last, since the beginning of the year has been facing a number of challenges. Is it gas? Is it grid? Is it even the distribution of energy and the quantum of energy that is being wheeled out by the generation companies? And Nigerians have been complaining. Not too long ago, we woke up to the increase in tariffs for band A customers to over 200 naira. And today we have our guests who will speak about a number of the issues that are there and what we should look out for the future. Usually when I start my presentations about power or energy, the first thing I say is power is not cheap. I know a number of people will ask me, but we've been getting it cheap in Nigeria, but the reality of it is that power is not cheap. The cost of investing in power, from the structure, from the generation plants to the transmission grids to the distribution networks, it costs a whole lot of money. And a number of these assets are not produced in Nigeria. So we also know the challenges that we face as it relates to the exchange rates, and that also brings about increase in the cost of power. But I'll just run through my presentation in terms of what we are looking at, what the challenges are, what things have been done by the government towards ensuring that there is an enabling environment for those who want to invest in the power sector to do that. I'll look at the amended Electricity Act of 2024. What are the key things that it brought about, and how do those who want to play in the power sector invest in that sector towards making it a more sustainable sector and reaching our goal of providing 24 hours electricity for Nigerians across the nation. The amended bill, which was signed into law in 2024, we remember that the president signed in the first bill in 2023, just after resuming taking over the helms of affairs of the administration. A number of the things that we should look at as it relates to that bill is the host community development, which for me is issues that relate to local content. 5% of that, 5% of the previous year's actual annual operating expenditure of power generating companies is expected to go into the development of host communities. This is a huge this will ensure that we can also, aside from generating power from those communities, also provide social amenities and a number of other infrastructure that would help them build those communities and carry Nigerians out of the current economic issues and challenges that we have. Empowerment of states and private entities. We've seen in the last couple of weeks, in the last week, the Nigerian Energy Regulatory Commission handing over some of their responsibilities to the state regulatory commissions and how that will function as you go on. There's also the funding to be managed for the host community by the GENCOs and the host communities by setting up a reputable trustee or manager to work on that. The regulatory oversight, which provides the state's authority to regulate their own electricity market by issuing licenses to private investors. So most of the investors in the power sector now should be looking at talking to the states. What are the state policies? How many of the states have policy on electricity and how they want it to go in terms of funding mini grids and power plants within the state's jurisdiction. And then renewable energy incentives is another key aspect of the act that we need to look at. And we know that a number of investments is coming in that area. Off-grid renewable generation, transmission and distribution companies are setting up across, especially as it helps to provide and boost rural electrification as we go on. What are the key provisions? I've mentioned that as it relates development and environmental concerns in host communities, provisions of 5% of GENCO's annual operating expenditure to develop infrastructure in host country, the management of the funds by a trustee or manager appointed by the GENCOs and the host community, regulations that empower the state, private sector engagement, especially as it relates to not just building the infrastructure, but having the right financing structure to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. And also the renewable generation obligations, which mandates electricity generation licenses to meet specific renewable energy targets, which should also be able to increase generation into the system as a whole. We know that over the last 5-10 years, a number of Nigerians, because of the electricity challenges, have gone into using solar panels towards boosting the electricity supply when there is no supply from the national grid. In my own opinion, and this is just me saying this, I think these are huge opportunities for developers, generation companies, transmission companies, distribution companies to start to work together and work with, whether it's the roof of the development that they're putting out towards generating energy, transmitting energy and distributing energy within communities, as the case may go. I'm sure our distinguished guests will throw more light on a number of those things as they go on and as they speak about it. What are the current realities of the sector? Generation has its challenges, source of supply management, frequent gas shortages, as we've seen. A number of the generation companies have complained about the pricing, hydro, solar impairment, investment in solar panels is really high. What are the incentives that are being given towards that, towards ensuring that more and more people can invest in renewable energy? And like I said, partnerships are an area that people should be looking at. We have aging infrastructure, foreign exchange. Like I said at the beginning, power is not cheap. The cost of investing in new infrastructure, new technology, online real time is quite expensive when you consider the fact that you have to import a number of those things. How are we utilizing capacity? Are we optimizing and maximizing the capacity? We know that Nigeria has between 12,000 to 15,000 megawatts of electricity that it can produce, but can the grid take it? Can the distribution channels take those energy that is wheeled out towards ensuring that Nigerians get electricity as at when due? Renewable integration, how do you integrate the traditional sources of generating power into along with the renewable sources that you have currently, and how do you make that work together with all the challenges that you have in terms of technology and all? And when you look at the transmission challenges, there's grid instability. When are we going to expand the grid? Grid instability has been on for as long as I can remember. We've not been able to wheel out energy or transmit energy wheeled out and transmitted has not been able to surpass 5,500 megawatts over time. Shortfall in investment. Do we have the resources to invest in the expansion? Are investors willing to take a gamble in terms of the transmission challenges that we have and build off-grid transmission lines to supply localities and communities? This is an area I think the states should be looking at. And then the upgrade of technology. When was the last time we upgraded our transmission grids? Even if we're updating them, are they meeting the challenges of today? Distribution has its own challenges in terms of high ATC&C losses. Metering is another large issue that we're dealing with. Who is going to fund it? Is it the consumer? Is it the distribution company? Is it the government that wants to step in and say, okay, let's meter everybody, and then we start to find the right modalities. We start to find the right modalities towards funding them in the long run and collecting the monies back. Theft and vandalism, like we know, energy theft is a huge issue in this country. Customer services and management, lack of efficient customer services. We've seen customers complain. Customers complain about arbitrary high bills when there are no meters and so on. Are we ready to invest in infrastructure? Infrastructure investment is a huge gap that we're facing in the energy and or the power sector, as the case may be. We need to upgrade some of our equipment. These are some of the challenges that we're looking at in terms of the networks or the distribution and the transmission companies. How efficient are these networks? How do we get to a cost-reflective tariff when the network infrastructure is not up to date or is not meeting the requirements or the demands of those who require electricity? How do we invest in metering, operational efficiency? Because government has handled power for a very, very long time, we're only just beginning to build capacity. We saw one of our speakers, most of his work had been done outside Nigeria. But now coming in to invest in Nigeria, do you have the right training facilities? Do you have the right talent in terms of management, in terms of technical management, in terms of executive management, in terms of operational management, and the regulatory framework? How has it assisted Nigerians? Maybe by moving some of this to the states will now be able to focus more and deal with those issues and challenges as we go on. And how do we energize the value chain? These are some of the things that we think at Nairametrics that we should be able to put in place. And I'm sure our speakers will touch more on them as we go on. Strengthening policy and regulations. We've seen NERC continually update the regulations in the energy sector as it relates to the consumer, consumer protection, distribution management, transmission and generation management. So are we applying them and enforcing them consistently is an issue we need to start looking at. Are we streamlining the administrative processes with the National Electricity Regulatory Commission moving a number of these activities to the state regulatory commissions? Are we going to start to see changes within those states? Are we imposing the right penalties when the terms and conditions are not being met? Are there clear guidelines for these penalties and assessment? Are we implementing corrective measures? We've seen the energy sector over the last 10 years since privatization of the GENCOs and the DISCOs with so many measures to try and correct the inefficiencies in the system. Investment in infrastructure, we've spoken about that as part of the challenges. Upgrade and expansion is a huge part of it. Investment in transmission and distribution networks, modernization of existing infrastructure, expanding grid capacity, some of the things that we think we should, every player within that industry should be looking at. Technology and innovation. Are we still using obsolete technology, or are we updating them into new technology? And how quickly are we updating them into new technology? What's the cost of investing in this new technology? Modernization and management. We spoke about talent. We spoke about, do we have enough people at that top level? Over the last 10 years, I know so many people have been developed and a number of them are beginning to go into more executive management levels. How quickly are we developing the ones that are coming behind them? And that brings us into capacity building and talent management, learning and development. Do we have enough facilities that are providing training and education for those in the energy sector? I know there are a number of them who are running that. And how quickly can those who have invested in this sector start to develop their young talent to take over and have what proper succession planning as we go on? Stakeholder management, we've seen the Act speak about that, 5% fund to be created towards developing local community and getting communities involved, corporate social responsibilities that are being carried out by the energy sector, by the energy players, and so on. Market reforms, we've seen the Electricity Act, purpose, objectives, the key provisions, are they being focused on either by the state? Because very soon what we'll start to see is the states are the ones who are managing this regulatory framework to ensure that those states are are generating, transmitting, and producing? Can it generate enough capacity, excess capacity that can be sold to other states? How are the states working together, either from a regional perspective or from an individual perspective, to ensure that all that is done? Local regulation, state level regulation, how many states have their energy policy in place? How does that comply with the regulatory framework across board nationally? Market understanding and management, understanding the market dynamics, who are the participants, trading mechanisms. Are we going to, with all the things happening that are going to start happening in the States, are we now going to see, like we saw in the telecoms, are we now going to see new participants in the trading mechanisms within the state? How do you manage the risk? How do you ensure regulatory oversight is put in proper place? And then the ease of doing business. This is one thing I need to hammer on, especially as the states start to take over the operations of their electricity demand. Are they looking at their operational challenges? Could they learn from other cases that have happened before now? And for us at Nairametrics, we believe that if you start to look at that value chain across board, as you look at the states start empowering themselves in creating opportunities and having ease of doing business within the states, maybe we just could start seeing that investment, the right financing structure, the right assets to be brought in, the right management team, the right talent to develop the Nigerian electricity market. And who knows, we just might be able to drive the electricity market and start to get 24 hours, hopefully sooner than later. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and I'll hand you back over to Samuel. Samuel, thank you very much for everything. And once again, I'd like to thank our distinguished guests who have honored us for this session. And as we throw the mic back to Samuel to start the panel itself. Thank you and have a great session.
All right, thank you very much, Yoade, for that very insightful presentation. I also took my notes, and I like the fact that you spoke to the ease of doing business and how the electricity, the energy sector really as a whole contributes to the broad economy. As we go into the panelist session, which promises to be an exciting conversation with a lot of insight. Professor Yemi, okay, if you can please switch on your camera and your mic. I think my first question will be directed at you. Since this new administration came in 2023, a lot of eyes has been on them across their various policies, and electricity and energy as a whole is a pivotal one that everyone is really putting their eyes on, especially just as Yuade has also alluded to the review in the tariff a while back for Band A customers. So a lot of Nigerians, businesses, and individuals are putting their eyes on what is happening in the energy sector. And don't forget, a huge part of operational expenses for most of the business is directed at either fuel or their electricity. So a lot of eyes have been there. And my first question to you, Prof, is that in your own opinion or from your own perspective, what key changes in energy infrastructure planning and investment strategies have been observed since the Tinubu assumed the office, and how do these planning and investment strategies that you've observed, how do they align with long-term sustainability goals, Prof?
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm excited to be here, to be a part of what the organization is doing. Expectedly, we had assumed or anticipated a new regime. We had expected a total departure from the status quo, particularly in electricity regulation and management in Nigeria under a Tinubu administration. And the logic for that is simple. As researchers and some of us who were involved then, as a young lawyers then, years back, we were involved in this experimented Lagos Heron thing. And somebody who had that futuristic thought, saying, hey, we should start to look at how to let Lagos State be self-sufficient in power. Years back, 1999, 2001. And a number of political issues unveiled that made it impossible. And the same personality who had experimented Lagos Aeron, by nature now tossed leadership on his laps, we expected that he would still be feeling the same way he felt to really get things done differently in the power sector. So when he got on board, he hit the ground running. The first strategic step was the sign into law the electricity bill now had within days of getting to power. We felt that was strategic. However imperfect that law is, or the bill was before signing into law, we needed a piece of legislation to operationalize the power sector. That's a major one. And in the law, we observed that a number of the issues we had with the old law had been taken care of. And again, we had a constitutional enablement that says they can get things done in the power sector. So that's the first key change that we noticed. Another one, in line with what some of us have been advocating, we said federal government will need to restructure, repackage its stakes in the discos and gencos. The government came on board and relinquished the Bureau of Public Enterprises of the shares of the federal government held in the discos. And the logic was simple, and it's still simple. The Bureau of Public Enterprises will have been conflicted if it's the one warehousing federal government shares in those discos. And the same Bureau of Public Enterprises will not be in charge of diluting, privatizing, or repackaging whatever the shares of government in those entities. We felt the Bureau should be concerned with the privatization or whatever structural changes in government equity in those entities. We were excited when Minister of Finance and Corporation requested for those shares on behalf of the federal government, which was that demo at this structure. Now, we now heard that the federal government now pulled back the subsidy in the power sector, which was something that advocated more than a decade and a half ago. And because a lot of Nigerians were not aware that too much subsidy exists in the corpus called energy, petroleum, gas, and power. But we're focusing on the petroleum. But humongous subsidy exists in the power sector, which is not reasonably justifiable. And we said that was going to affect the workings of the federal government, because government had been subsidizing production as against actual consumption, meaning government had been subsidizing wastages and recklessness at the level of the generation and distribution, because there wasn't any incentive for them to get efficient with their cost of production. And whatever cost is built into the unit per tariff, and Nigerians are built for it, humongous. So there was no incentive for them to get efficient in what they do, because the federal government is already paying for those losses. And who are we subsidizing? If government says, okay, we generate, of course, we'll be oscillating around 4,000 thereabout that we've been having since the days of NEPA and PACL, despite privatization. So if the subsidy is for the actual generation of 4,000 megawatts, if government puts subsidy under the embed, like let's say 10% or 20% subsidy in the power sector, over 4,000 megawatts. By the time the megawatts goes to the end user, we have generation losses, transmission losses, and other losses. What actually gets consumed by Nigerians is about 3,000 or 3,200 about megawatts. Meaning government has subsidized waste. 2, government is now subsidizing every consumer of electricity. Those who want to have like 30 units of air conditioning systems in their homes and offices, they are the ones getting the subsidies. 2, unscrupulous Nigerians will also bypass about 20 to 30% of what is megawatts is bypassed. So meaning government had been subsidizing waste. And we said so to the previous administrations, then the last administration. But now, this current administration took it up and acted decisively. And I can go on and on. The body language is such that if you continue the way we are going under the current administration, we're most likely going to get most of the challenges or problems of the power sector solved. There are technical issues, as you alluded in your own flow. There are operational issues, there are regulatory issues, there are so many issues. We have to take one step at a time. It aligns with our expectations. One, I have advocated that we can't start to have a federated power sector in the 21st century. The discourse will be in one area, and there will be an IPP, an independent power producer, who is able to generate. And that person cannot trade with the megawatts generated. It has to come through the discourse under what is called franchise. And the discourse have cornered the others and said, oh, this is my area, my franchise, you can't trade there, you can't do anything there, you have to come through me. And I said, under a reasonable structure, the discourse will need to get cross-license in the respective states where they operate. And that is what the federal government is doing now, about to do. I can say out of 100 advocacies I've made, or some of us as industry experts have made, you can see most of them now getting crystallized under the current administration. You can see the body language of a listening administration ready to do things differently. Because the power sector, as I've said, was about to collapse on all of us, including the great collapses that we've been saying. We will sit down and put pen to paper and calculate the number of great collapses we're going to have. Like say 12. This year we're expecting 12 or 13. Why? Because I'm always certain that there will still be great collapses, because those things that make our national grid to collapse, they're still there. Are we addressing that? Maybe yes, maybe no. And one aspect of the current policy I've not really been kind of optimistic about, which I've said even to all those who get to listen to me, Mr. President, I've never been as optimistic as to the Siemens project. Just the same way I wasn't as keen, as optimistic at the Manitoba Hydro deal. Because I pointed out a lot of things that were not proper in the Manitoba deal. So that went down the drain as expected, as predicted. But as to Siemens, I'm not saying Siemens might not bring about the miracle we expect in the power sector, particularly the transmission infrastructure. Hi, Yemi, okay. I am not as optimistic as to the miracles Siemens will perform in the power sector, because they're already way off behind schedule. And we are still not seeing motion without movement. So I'm not criticizing Siemens. I applauded the moves of the president. Immediately he went to Germany to see the German chancellor. He sought audience with the Siemens people. Hey guys, what is happening? This Nigerian thing is dragging for too long. I smiled. But we're still expecting, hopefully, that I'll be pleasantly surprised that Siemens will work. But beyond Siemens, we still have a number of things we need to fix. Another aspect I'm not kind of happy with, which wouldn't be due to the fault of the president, is the issue of Rural Electrification Agency and Rural Electrification Fund. One, Rural Electrification Agency and Rural Electrification Fund are off-grid issues. Even under the unamended constitution, off-grid was supposed to be for states. Now that we have the constitutional amendment, which says states can go both on-grid and off-grid. What is the business of the federal government with off-grid? Something as mundane as solar, renewables, biomass, and all those stuff. Those should be considered up to the states so they can get engaged and do something. But under the structure that we have, I was surprised that despite the fact that we said it wasn't necessary, we still have Rural Electrification Agency, Rural Electrification Fund being part of the Electricity Act of 2023. I'm also not too happy, which I hope the government is trying to address, that under the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005, we had PCAF, Power Consumer Assistance Fund, in place, which was a mechanism put in place by the law, now repealed, to channel subsidies in the power sector to underprivileged Nigerians. Gladly, we have the same PCAF in the new Electricity Act of 2023. So why are we adding subsidy put in the pockets of wrong Nigerians? Why are we subsidizing Nigerians who can afford their losses in terms of electricity and power consumers as consumption? As you said, power is not cheap. It's never cheap all over the world. So you go to other countries, subsidy is directly reflected in their electricity utility bills to homes that need or will merit the subsidies. But in Nigeria, we are subsidizing production, and very rich Nigerians are enjoying the subsidies, and a lot of rich and elites are bypassing their electricity. And then you have all kinds of theft in the industry. So government is all putting money in the drain. So it wasn't going to be sustainable. I can go on and on. I guess I will pause so that my colleagues on the panel can also react. Then I can also react to other questions on specific issues in the power sector. But by and large, key additions have been taken. They align with our expectations. They align with our assumptions. They align with what we have advocated. And we hope it will be sustained and will be sustained so that we can have a power sector of our dream before it collapses on all of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor. Okay, and I took a lot of notes from your comments there. Generally, I think the idea is that many of the stipulations in the Act and bill are in line with expectations. Of course, you also noted out some of the areas that you think are great. And I'll come to you now, Mr. Olabode is showing me on the back of what Professor Oke has said, right? And he has said a number of policies and changes have come up since this administration. And like I said earlier, the world and Nigeria, everyone is looking on to the government to see some of the policies that they are doing and how it's going to impact on average Nigerians. And I think one of the key areas is trust, right? So in terms of governance and transparency, what innovative approaches or regulatory reforms have been instrumental in enhancing stakeholder trust and investor confidence in Nigeria's energy sector under the current administration?
Okay, thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. First and fundamentally, I think when we talk about the power sector, it's always important to put the politics aside from the technical issues. And I'm a consultant, which means I deal mainly with industry issues, the technical issues, and we leave the politics for the politicians and the activists. Now, the industry is a privatized industry, which means it is being run by the private sector largely. And when you look at the breakdown of the value chain, the discos are private driven. Yes, government has some shares, but it's not majority, so it's private driven. Transmission is 100% government, but it's precisely just that. It's a carrier. It's a vehicle for conveyance. And then, of course, you have distribution, which is where the rubber touches the road. It is the part that connects with the consumer. It is the part that the consumer knows as the power sector, which is distribution, transmission, and generation. Generation itself is 100% a private sector. Now, when you have a free market, which is the bedrock of democracy, when you have a free market, the essence of governance, the essence of government is to provide framework and infrastructure for it. In other words, it is not really in the interest of free market for direct intervention of governance and government. in the way it runs. So having said that, we now look at the things that are challenging us, bedeviling us, and which is commonplace now. When your colleague started with an overview of the sector, he highlighted all the key issues, from all the little complaints, from energy theft to the liquidity issues that are there. And then the key thing with everybody's tongue is that the price is too high, the price is this and that. And I remember discussing the day after the band A was segmented and the price imputed there. And I asked that, a gentleman said that the price was too high. So I asked him, what should the price be? And that is the question for everybody. And he couldn't say a thing. Because you see, when you look at all the analysis for the industry, when you look at all the complaints about whether it be subsidy in the industry and all that, the whole focus is always on the price being high. But nobody, and I repeat now, nobody that I've seen that actually has an idea of the cost of production. Now, the fact is that the liquidity in the sector is due to the fact that the cost at which we are selling power is less than the cost of generation, production, and transmission. In other words, the industry is running at a loss in terms of the value chain. Now, what this means is that somebody is taking that loss, at least somebody in the meantime. And it is that loss, it is the balance of that loss that is really what is called government subsidy in the power sector. So the subsidy is not like government, it's not like in petroleum, it's because when all is said and done and people are being owed, and government needs to intervene in the sector, and government has intervened in the sector a number of times. There was 702 billion, there was 212, there have been a number of all those interventions. It is those interventions that are ultimately called the subsidy for the sector. Now, for subsidy to be removed in this case, it simply means that people have to buy electricity at the cost that is not just the cost of producing it, but the cost of producing it and a little profit for the people who operate the sector. And that is where there's a challenge. Ordinarily, that should be the way the economy should go. But the truth be told is that power is both a social issue and it's also, a technical and commercial issue. The social issue is where government gets involved. And when there's all this talk about putting the responsibility on one particular person or one particular government or one person in election promising to end all the issues, it's mainly out of ignorance. You cannot solve an issue where there's a liquidity crisis. It's just not possible. It's against the fundamentals of economics. And many people who say these things are also ignorant of the core issues in the industry. So when we look at some of the fundamentals that you've raised, that's coming back to the question, if I get it correctly, was, does the current economy by the government encourage investors? That's the current policies. Does it encourage investors and all that? The fact is that investors don't throw their money around. We can ask anybody if your housemate or somebody junior, maybe from village or something, comes to you and he says he has this business that he wants to sell plantain or whatever. And in that business, he has mapped it out for you and is going to be making a loss every day. Whether you are not likely to be incentivized. So irrespective of the policies and laws that government have, there is the fundamentals of economics which people need to look into in the power sector. If you look at the books of all the people that are operating the sector, they are running at losses. So what magic is going to attract investors? And it is part of the attempts to get people to understand this, that we are talking about right pricing. Because yes, on one hand, people are talking about the fact that the price is high, but nobody has said what the actual price should be. So there is an antagonistic orientation of the public towards power pricing. And this is where probably there could be some government responsibility in terms of educating the public in how the cost is arrived at and what that cost is. Because in all the discussions, in all the interactions with respect to the power price, nobody is talking about the cost of production. And once we begin to talk about cost of production, I mean, for example, if the price is 150 naira per kilowatt today, and we actually found out that the cost of production is actually 165. So there's still a shortfall of 10 naira. The discussion, the mitigation, the agitation will significantly reduce. So there's a responsibility of that. And of course, if we find out that the price is much lower than the price that they are selling, then there's a legitimate reason to ask for downward review. But in the absence of facts, in the absence of the fundamentals, what we will just be doing is activism without a basis, or what they call rebels without a cause. You must have a legitimate basis to ask for a number of all these changes. And having said that, there's also a push, there's also the need for a push to help those who are operating the sector to develop capacity. So everywhere where there's significant economic ability in terms of the private sector, which we're talking about the developed nations, the government has programs that helps entrepreneurs and people that run businesses to develop capacity in business. And when you ask the average person that runs a business, can you do a business plan? They say no. Have you seen a business plan before? The number even reduces further. So the issue is that in terms of the capacity to do business, in terms of the capacity to understand business, there needs to be a concerted effort by government to help people to manage that power sector, because the government at best is like a coach in a football team. It is still the responsibility of the players to play the game and score the goals. So those are fundamentals within that area. And let me also add this. The best part of being liquid, the best part of anybody having money is having options. Money allows you to have options, whether in life, whether in... There are certain options in terms of our energy mix that need to be explored. And one primary one is coal. Because as at today, irrespective of the noise about transition and all that, 40% of global electricity comes from coal. And it is in developed nations, it's not in Africa. So if we have significant coal, if we have coal at about the size of South Africa, and South Africa still generates power by coal, and why can't we look at that option, which may also reduce our dependence on gas, which definitely will reduce all the issues that the GenCos have with respect to gas pricing and all that. So those are options that remain for Nigeria. The idea that the solution to the power sector is one magical idea that you need a genius to come about is not true. The solution lies in one, elimination of the liquidity issues, which means right pricing. So it's either the people pay the right price for the power, for the electricity, or government pays it, which will be subsidy. But to the man that runs the business, he just wants his money. And so that's one part of it. The second part of it is our own orientation as people. When somebody steals power, energy, people are likely to chatter and say, the guy is smart, the guy is intelligent, the guy is a sharp guy. But the truth is that you don't actually steal it. Somebody takes the cost. In other words, that energy that is stolen is spread around to the rest of everybody. Because if there is really a gap, the power sector will collapse. And guess what? If the power sector does collapse, and it can collapse, we are going to be paying 10 times for electricity what we are paying now. So it is an orientation as a people that we need to know that when people are stealing energy, they are cutting us short from our commonwealth. And it is just like when people are stealing crude oil. The theft in crude oil is part of what has led to our forex prices, because the government did not have enough forex to back the things they were doing up. And that is because they weren't earning enough income, because virtually everybody was stealing crude oil because it was free for all. And with the same thing goes into power sector. So there's an orientation. And when we gather and agree as a group, as a people, that energy theft is antisocial, is anti-cultural, and criminal, it will significantly reduce. And when that reduces, it adds to the liquidity in the sector. The other part in terms of solution to all of this is the process of holding people accountable. So whether it be people who are responsible for energy theft, whether it be people who are working in the sector, a few people need to go to jail, just like it happened with Bobrisky, so that people can wake up and stop mutilating the Naira. People need to go to jail for doing the wrong thing. When one or two people do that, people will wake up, people will calm down, and then they will allow the industry to run. But without resolving the liquidity issues, without having people being responsible for wrongdoing, without the fundamentals of the industry being looked at, we'll just be kidding ourselves looking for solution. Because the idea in Nigeria is that people try to do the right thing, or they do the right thing a bit, then they stop, then they start expecting a miracle. And that miracle may come in a Messiah. They think that somebody will come and then suddenly take away all the problems of the power sector. It's not possible. The power sector is going to be resolved by doing the right things consistently over a long time, and it will gradually resolve all the little problems that are there. But the one that nobody can go circle over is that there must be right pricing for electricity. That must be known. Whether we can pay it or not is a different thing. Know what the right price is. When we know what the right price for electricity is, then the argument will now be, how are we going to get the right price? Because sometimes it is that it is just not affordable by the people. And when it is not affordable, there has to be a way out of it. And that way can be discussed. But the idea of hiding behind a finger and seeing something that is costing 200 and saying that it's too expensive for 120, we're just deceiving ourselves. And nobody makes progress in self-deception. Shakespeare said, to thy own self be true. We need to identify the real issues, discuss it, and come to terms with it. Let me pause at this time.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Olabode. Quite interesting points there around the right pricing, educating the public on the cost, and to ensure that at least we have an understanding of the components that make up the cost, and then I think with some of the social part of things, changing our orientations, we might be able to attract some form of investment in the industry. And then on the back of some of the things that Mr. Olabode has said, I want to come to you, Professor Oke. The Nigerian economy has been largely seen as one that is quite susceptible to changes in the global market across different things, trade, energy, prices of food, and whatnot. And really, also in terms of energy, how do you anticipate geopolitical factors and global energy trends influencing Nigeria's energy policies under the current administration? And what strategies do you think should be adopted to navigate potential challenges and capitalize on emerging opportunities from your assessment of global trends, Professor?
Thank you very much. Hope I'm the one to talk now.
Yes, please go ahead, Prof.
Okay. Thank you. My colleague there raised a number of issues, and it's still a lot about the kind of system we run. Liquidity issues, yes, because the sector is not going to be buoyant, and nobody will want to invest if existing players are not making money. The first port of call is to, if you want to invest in a country, is to see and ascertain that it's bankable. The people on ground, almost all of them are insolvent. So if you have 98% of the players being insolvent, that tells you that that's not the kind of place you want to plunge your resources. Then energy theft, before going to the global energy issues to raise. energy theft has been an issue. But sadly, the industry players are kind of ignorant until we started even running training for them to know that there are laws, existing laws, even though the repealed Electric Power Sector Reform Act was grossly inefficient, inadequate in terms of punishing offenders for electricity theft. We were able to aggregate other options, miscellaneous provision, miscellaneous offences act, penal code, and others to whip up relevant provisions that could be deployed to prosecute and deal with the issue of energy theft. It's a big issue. As I said, it's a common asset. But gladly we have electricity act that provides serious penal consequences for electricity theft. But electricity theft exists at the level of even the players themselves. You know, those who collude to reduce the expected billings for certain entities. If you're supposed to be paying 5, somebody will bill for 2, then the organization will pay 1, and somebody keeps 1. There's a whole lot of fraud in the system. And those who brings about others threatening to disconnect and collecting money, putting in their pockets. We have documented cases of that. And unscrupulous Nigerians stealing electricity. We have huge issues of energy theft, and that will make the sector unattractive. So coming to the global realities, he mentioned example of coal. Some have been talking of nuclear technologies for the purpose of power. We are still here trying just to scratch the surface in terms of energy generation. We are not there yet. We are still struggling with modern traditional forms of generation through hydro and gas. The issue of gas pricing is key. We were strategic when we advised government to put domestic gas obligation in the Petroleum Industry Act. We knew it wasn't going to be realistic because gas is an international commodity. It is bought and sold in the international market at international rates or prices. You are not going to hear of somebody having idle gas produced because gas is bought and sold. It's good money. It's hot cake. And essentially, our energy, our infrastructure is essentially dependent on gas to a large extent. Gas is the feedstock. Nigeria is a country more of gas than petroleum, than crude oil. We've neglected gas incentive or incentivizing gas production. So the insignificant amount of gas that we now produce in Nigeria, we are telling gas players who will be high in international prices and markets to reserve a quantum and give it to the Nigerian power sector so that they will power Nigerians, you and I. And we said that would not be realistic because we are basically telling them to sell their gas at a loss. Who does that? And then we knew that the patriotic clause we put there called domestic gas obligation would not be realistic. So they started supplying gas through embed and other structures, but they weren't having enough payments. There has been a lot of shortfalls that government was actually struggling to clear. That further brings us to the issue of liquidity in the system. And the gas producer says, hey, I can't continue to run this business. I'm not going to supply gas to you. They continue to trade their products. Who is paying for the gas? Who is subsidizing gas? At what cost? So the issue of pricing that my colleague mentioned is still key. You don't need to subsidize those who can afford to pay for their electricity. And if you must subsidize, then you subsidize those who need the subsidy. So we need to rework the whole structure, or else the liquidity issue will be there and nobody will be encouraged to invest. The global trend is such that energy is something that you can generate from all sources and any source. In Namibia, we went for a seminar. We were toying with the idea of regulating electricity generation from bush. There was a technology called the bushing technology, similar to generating electricity from our Sambisa forest. In a city in Munich, they had issues with energy. They needed energy to heat their homes. Of course, you know, in the winter, they need heater. In the summer, they need a cooling system. And the same thing, just as your car will be cooling and sometimes will generate some heat. So the particular city needed energy. They identified their fixture to be renewables. So they now started encouraging homes and offices to generate waste. So they now put a restriction on what you can charge to generate waste. For instance, you can't charge more than 5 naira for 1 kg of waste. They wanted to maximize waste production for their energy. It got to a level they weren't getting enough waste, so they brought a policy to reduce the amount charged for waste collection from 5 naira to 2 naira. They weren't still getting enough waste. They now started to give money like 2 naira or 5 naira to homes to generate waste. That's the thinking, progressive thinking. You have to deploy your best advantage for your energy sector. If your strength is in solar, by every means, embark on extensive solarization. If your competitive edge or advantage is in hydro, by every means, stimulate investment in hydro. If your best deal is in gas, deploy every legal strategic initiatives to stimulate gas production for your energy sector. If you used to go by way of biomass, wind, and other options, nuclear, coal. The energy mix is what the world is trending about now. You can't rely on gas because you are not in control of gas prices. You are best at deploying sources or options where you have competitive advantages or edge. Then it makes your sector competitive, then investors will come because once they know there is the assurance that they're going to reap their investment with profits, they will come naturally. So the world is actually going the option of energy mix. We call it a maximum megawatt from all sources. I had a theory years back, I call it decentralized energy options. You can't start to move or you can't continue to move in one direction for your energy. Then the world is going extensively in the direction of renewables and off-grid. Just as we saw a trend in some countries deploying policies, ticketing policies, restriction of cars and lorries in certain communities. It's an attempt to take cars off the roads. Whereas a country like Nigeria is encouraging cars back on the road. So it's a question of what you seek to achieve. Do we want to go with the trend in terms of global energy consumption? If the answer is yes, then we should be looking in the direction of nuclear and or coal. If you want to do or continue with our small scale level, deploying our best option, then we can scale up gas production. If that is the case, we have to deploy essentially off-grid options, captive, embedded, and others, because our existing infrastructure in terms of grid infrastructure is dilapidated, is challenged in several ways, and the world is going mini grids, mobile grids, and so many options that we can deploy. So our energy sector is not completed, and the feedstock is also not completed. We sit on gas as a country, but we haven't done sufficiently well in terms of maximizing the gains of the gas of gas sector. The issue of pricing is still there. Incentivizing production is there, among others. So if you generate gas, who's going to pay for it? And if you tell Nigerians to be prepared for further increases in electricity tariffs, it could cost you your mandate as a government. So everybody is being careful. And then we have to find a solution. And that's what we have. Let me pause for now.
All right, thank you very much, Professor. Okay, and you really made quite salient points as regards the fact that the dependence on gas as a source of power for Nigeria really makes us susceptible, because since we don't have control over the price of gas in the global market. And something that you said that really struck for me was the energy mix thing. And with this new electricity act that allows state government to be able to generate and distribute power in the respective jurisdictions, I think it would be interesting to see, for example, areas in the northern area, especially when you're talking about putting your best foot forward, taking energy mix that is in line with your competitive advantage. So you see the likes of states in the northern region trying to go by the ways of solar and wind, and then areas in other regions of the country adopting some level of the mix, probably coal, hydro, for example, those in the riverine areas and whatnot. I think that's quite interesting. I was looking at the NAC report for Q4 2023, especially, I think both you and Mr. Olabode also alluded to the fact that there's a liquidity issue in the energy mix. And I'm looking at Disco's remittance performance to MBET and MOs and market operations for Q4 alone. The invoice that they had was around 270 billion. That's for Q4. Their actual remittance for that period was 188 billion. That gives them like a shortfall of almost 90 billion naira. And if you analyze that's going across around 360 billion in terms of shortfall just to MBET and MO. And really, if you look at our efficiency numbers, it dropped. Their remittance performance for Q4 2023 was 69.8%, approximately 70%, and that compares to 75% in Q3 2023. And that gives you an indication that in terms of how well they are performing, in terms of how they're able to meet their obligations to MBET and other operators, it is really dwindling rather than improving recently. I just felt I needed to give those statistics to also back your points around the issues of liquidity and how that might be impacting on investments in the Nigerian power and energy sector. I'm coming to you, Mr. Olabode, just to wrap up on this conversation around the Nigeria's energy landscape in this current administration. But just like as you have said, that we have significant issues and we're susceptible to global changes and movements in prices of gas, especially in the global market. So considering the unique challenges and opportunities in Nigeria's energy landscape, what regulatory frameworks or policy incentives do you think would be necessary to promote widespread adoption of commercial viability of energy technologies? For example, hydrogen fuel cells and carbon capture, utilization and storage, CCUS. We talked about coal a while back, wind and whatnot. And then again, most importantly, how can the government collaborate with industry stakeholders to drive innovation and investment in these areas? If you can please go ahead in as much as 5 to 6 minutes, Mr. Olabode.
Okay, I will stick to that. I think first and fundamentally, while it is true that gas is a global commodity which has global pricing, for Nigeria we have a comparative advantage in that, obviously because we're a gas nation. But more importantly, The real cost of gas to us is the cost of producing gas here. We have a lot of gas reserves, which everybody knows, but we do not have processed gas. So the gas that is useful is not the one in the reserves, it's the one that is processed. So it's like saying you have a lot of river water, but you have none available to drink. So water everywhere, none for drinking. So for us, if we want to mitigate gas reserves, gas pricing, it is about building more gas processing plants. It's as simple as that. It is not so much the international price of gas. Now, when it comes to coal and to hydrogen and all that, there are some things that are international politics. And that's why a lot of times it's best to allow experts in the field to make definitive decisions and to drive the thought. Hydrogen as at today, hydrogen at any point in time does not use the internal combustion engine. So for perspective, the internal combustion engine is the engine that was being developed over the last 100 years that uses petrol and diesel. It's basically the same engine, just the fuel cells that are used. Now for hydrogen, they have to totally reconstruct the engine. It uses a different type of engine set. So what it means is that if we're going to start using hydrogen, the machines, Okada as we know it today, the total engine infrastructure will change. Every car that you know, whether it be Benz, whether it be Land Rover, whether it be Volkswagen, the engine itself will change. Is the world able from private sector and to invest in that simply to accommodate a new fuel? That's a question anybody can answer. The second part of it is that hydrogen is expensive to make today. In other words, the cost of producing hydrogen, the cost at which we produce hydrogen at the moment is more expensive than the cost of using it because of the machine. So the energy you put into the electrolysis or whatever method that you use to produce hydrogen, let's say it is 50 naira per kilowatt. You find out that, 50 naira per cubic liter, whatever. You will find out that same hydrogen will only burn and produce 35 naira. So it's basically you're entering. So there are some things that are there for global politics and maybe future directions. That is not where we want to be getting involved in. And when people talk about this energy transition thing and all that, it's always best, like I said, to stick to what you know. Let's stick to the fundamentals. You will see that a lot of the coaches that win championships, not one match, but with a lot of matches over the season, they stick to the fundamentals. They ensure that their defense is straight. They ensure that the people who are defenders are not always in front. They ensure that the midfielders do their work. There are some basics. The fundamentals of life are very important. In terms of getting our energy mix right, we don't have to have every energy source. We can stick with our hydrogen, we stick with our hydro, and if coal comes in, it's welcome. If not, let's maximize what we already have. We still have a lot of streams, waterfalls, that can be converted into mini hydro power plants that can feed villages, that can feed rural communities and serve the underserved. Those are options to look into. So like I said, the whole idea of one exoteric, sexy energy option is part of the ways where we get it wrong and part of the ways where we lose focus. In terms of government policies, let me make this analysis. Now, government policies, so there are three things. There are laws, there are regulations, and there are policies. What all those things seek to do and what they do is that they give guidelines. They actually don't play the game. So the idea, they give guidelines, they don't play the game. The idea that the white lines on the road is what is going to what is going to determine the speed with which the driver of the car is driving is just lunacy. The driver on the car is going to drive at any speed he wants. In fact, he can even decide to park his car. The guidelines on the road are just there as guidelines to prevent the person from injuring himself and prevent the person for being safe to other road users. So it is not the white lines on the road, which are guidelines, that actually determines the movement per se. So when government puts in policies, it is incumbent upon the players, whether they be generation companies, whether they be transmission entities, whether they be distribution entities, to increase their tempo, to increase their speed, and to work everything out. And that is the essence of the free market. The government itself is not going to be pushing them and say, do this, do that. They must, on their own free volition, look at innovative options. And that is why I emphasize the fact that their capacity can be helped to improve. Now, there's a question in the session, because I was looking through the questions there, about the gentleman who was asking about the ATC and C losses. So the actual technical term is aggregate, technical, collection, and commercial losses. Aggregate, technical, commercial, and collection losses. Now, it speaks to the fact there was a way in which they technically aggregated all the issues in the industry. You know, today people will speak this way, but that was the way, and that was the basis, the foundation for which the privatization of the discos took place. Now, this is the point. This is the point there. When those losses were aggregated and when they were defined, the people who the discos were sold to were not sold to them at the highest price. They were sold at those who presented a good price, as well as the best method for eliminating all the losses in the industry. So in other words, the things we complain about, whether it be energy theft, it comes under collection losses. Whether it be innovation in terms of improving the infrastructure there, it comes under technical losses. So all those things were the things that the discos covenanted with government to resolve. And that is why those losses are there. It is not so much as an inability of people to actually manage, competent to manage the sector. But like I said, if you are running at a loss, even if you call the last 3 winners of the Nobel Prize in economics to come and manage that place, as long as the fundamentals of economics are there, you are running at a loss. There's no magic that is going to happen. So it's incumbent upon us as Nigerians, as we talk and as we seek improvement. And this is just for those who seek improvement. Like I said, I'm not interested in the politics. I'm a technical person. I'm interested in the progress of the industry. For those who want to play politics with the power sector, is good. They can do that during elections. But for those who want improvement, it is important that they understand the fundamentals of the industry. And it is in understanding the fundamentals of the industry that we can put the critical amount of pressure on the right places so that the industry itself can improve. Without that knowledge, we will be all talk and no action. And when you do not talk to the right places, the people that matter will ignore all the talk. You can say a lot of things. As long as you are not saying it right, you can shout. As long as you are not hitting the point. When decisions need to be made, they'll just say those people are charlatans and rabble-rousers. But when you speak to the issues, when you speak to the fundamentals of pricing, when you make a proper comparative analysis that is not based on jaundiced views, they will be forced to listen and they will be forced to take action. So in improving the sector, it is not just about the investor putting in money or about the disco acquiring more competence. It is also about the user, that's you and I, the customer of the industry, so that they can point fingers in the right way.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Olabode, for that. And that more or less wraps the section on the energy and landscape. We'll try to go through the next set of sections because we want to talk about infrastructure development and grid expansion. We also want to touch on renewable energy adoption in Nigeria. But meanwhile, to our audience, if you have questions and comments, you can make use of the Q&A session section of the platform to ask your questions, and then we'll try to bring them up at some point in the conversation. And our panelists can also respond to some of your questions directed at them in the Q&A session. I see that some of those have already been addressed. I want to come to you, Professor Kerr, And really, we really have spoken at length concerning the current issues and around the Nigerian energy sector. And so on and so forth. But again, there's still the need for there needs to be some level of handshake between the private and public sector. So from your experience, what do you think are critical success factors in implementing an efficient transmission, which would include grid modernization program, and how can public-private partnership facilitate the deployment of cutting-edge technologies while also ensuring some level of financial sustainability, Prof?
Sorry, I didn't get the first aspect of your question, but I got the aspect about the IPPs, I mean the PPPs and the financial stability kind of. Yes, I didn't get the
The first
first
part, I'm
aspect.
saying that what do you think are critical success factors that would need to implement an efficient transmission? So for this transmission, it could include grid modernization programs, for example. So what are those factors that the government or the stakeholders really need to implement?
I think, to be honest with you, we've started seeing steps. For instance, grid infrastructure is being attended to, and that's exactly what the Siemens deal is supposed to be doing. That was what Manitoba was supposed to be doing, and they couldn't achieve. But we are saying, from the point of view of industrial realities, we should now talk less about grid, because the world talks about concession grid, state grid, regional grid, mini grid, mobile grid, off grid. So when we talk of grid, what model of grid distribution are we looking at? There are mobile power plants that people just move and assemble in a particular location. You don't need to go on grid. People are talking of renewable options. Those are off grid. So we need, as a nation, to decide whether we want to continue grid-based generation and distribution, which is challenged because it's expensive and it's not reliable. It's like saying you want to continue distributing your petroleum products using dilapidated pipelines. You have other options of ferrying petroleum products through the seas, air, or cargo, rail, you're still going to get to the consumers as against using the pipelines. So the same thing for the power supply. How do you get your megawatts or kilowatts across to end users? Must it go through the national grid? Must the grid be federated in the 21st century? So we now, to achieve success in the sector, start to think of grid. Really, we need to enhance the existing grid infrastructure and start to deploy a whole lot of off-grid and renewable options. Gladly, another success sign of success I can see or imagine is the fact that now, as we argue, states are now get on board as a matter of the Constitution and as a matter of the Electricity Act. Mathematically, as I've argued, it's not state government that will do it, but state government will provide the enabling environment to get that done. Let's assume we have 774 local governments in Nigeria. Let's assume the states, in 4 years of an administration, a particular state that has 20 local government is able to assist players to other on-grid, off-grid, renewable, captive, solar, what have you, generate 2 megawatts in the lifetime of the administration for 4 years in one particular local government. As means we're able to generate 2 megawatts in 4 years from each and every of the 774 local government that we have in the country. Now push up somewhere through essentially renewables and other alternatives for the rural areas, looking at very cheap energy options and deploy. So we need to decentralize the power sector in terms of the way we get players to come on board, the way we go about the governance issues in the system. And that is why I was excited when I heard that government now says the disco will have to generate from, distribute, the discos will have to focus on state-based things, meaning, for instance, they mentioned Ibadan will now have to set up structures, subsidiaries in Oyo and other states for efficiency. That's the kind of thing we need to do. If this power sector is doing the right thing, you see players who come on board, they will invest. We are seeing a lot of investment which we are not talking about now because a lot of Nigerians are investing in solar. A lot of Nigerians are investing in inverters. Those are renewable options. There's hardly any Nigerian business or early that has not invested in few millions in solar panels or solar or inverters, battery. Those are renewable options. And we need to continue to scale things up, making sure we aggregate all those options. So the way to go is to embrace all the options, as I've said earlier. We won't say, oh, because we are gas-based or we have a lot of gas reserve, we should focus on gas that is not yet developed. And we need to also, as my colleague mentioned, we need to scale up gas production as against the hydro reserve that we have. Because Nigeria seems to have competitive advantage in that regard. And when I talk of decentralized energy options, and I said if your water flow is good for many hydro, he also alluded to the same thing. Let's deploy it. If your terrain is good for solar, get an investor, sit down and discuss the financial details. Let them set up solar farms to target a particular community. And that brings me to the issue of working with the private sector. To generate a megawatt will cost a few millions, maybe $1 or $2 million or $1.5 million. No state government can do that. State government are not to use their budgetary allocation to develop the power sector. That's not what we are advocating. If your state is responsible, if your state is diligent, if your state is well managed, if your state honors its contractual obligation, if the financial records of your state is stable, shows a stable financial outlook, where your state complies and obeys its own laws and honors its own agreements, and puts in place decent terrain for businesses to thrive, you see investors coming to your state to invest in the power sector, in renewables and other options. It's not that the government will put money down. Government will only need to create an enabling environment and it's against putting money down. You stimulate investment. There are people going around looking for where to invest their money, provided it is bankable and they're going to make profits. So, financial aspect of it. Government doesn't have the funds that is required, of course, but there are ways government can partner with the private sector to encourage PPP models of development in the power sector through incentives. Of course, we've seen government giving incentives by way of holidays and waivers, import waivers, these waivers to manufacturing companies. I don't want to mention names. I think the same kind of fellowship may be extended to serious-minded players in the power sector and free up the space for decent levels of competitiveness. And with that, I guess we will have headed in the right direction as a country. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Oker. There, we need to scale up gas production, and if possible, government should also bring in some form of incentives for the gas players, as we've seen in recent times. across other industries and sectors of the economy. Mr. Alabode, I want to come to you just to wrap this final section of the question of this segment, right? And we've spoken about some of the challenges that the Nigerian energy sector as a whole is going through. But like what I would always say is that whenever there are challenges or whenever there are problems, there are also opportunities for growth and even profit maximization. And on the back of that, I just wanted to say, so reflecting on those market dynamics, what investment opportunities and risk considerations do renewable energy, we've spoken about that at length at some point, so renewable energy projects present in Nigeria, and how can regulatory certainty and market incentives foster greater private sector participation, Mr. Labode? Okay, so I think Mr. Olabode dropped out from the conversation, but I want to bring that same question to Prof. Right, you made mention of the private and private public partnership and how that might be able to help foster some level of growth in the Nigerian power industry. And of course, we've also spoken about how we also need to start considering options in the renewable power generation rather than put our eggs in one basket, and that's gas, especially considering that we do not have so much capacity in this line. So on that note, what opportunities do you think renewable energy really presents? Oh, Mr. Olabode is back. Prof, you can hang on to that thought. Let Mr. Olabode take this question, and I will also get your take as a final take on that. So, Mr. Olabode, my question was reflecting on the market dynamics, what investment opportunities and risk considerations do you think that renewable energy projects in Nigeria will present, right? And what regulatory certainty, market incentives do you think will foster greater private sector and public sector participation?
Okay, to be seen for what it is. It's a needed for the energy mix, but it is not a replacement for. You hear me? Like I said, needs to be seen for what it is. It is a replacement. So the advocates or the other extreme side of it believes that renewable there is fossil fuel. That's not going to happen, and the science different argument now. There are many things. Though is an energy source, it cannot power a caterpillar, for example. You still need to use for it. It cannot be used in the military that are run by battery. They cannot even power it. They cannot use it. There's a solar solstice flying between San Francisco and Singapore. There are certain limitations that renewable energy cannot do, but it can help with the underserved areas. Generation efforts, you can have micro generation efforts. Know that we can focus on what matters. We avoid and ignore the fundamentals. The fundamentals that we're looking at basically hydro, we're looking at coal, we're looking at gas. The need to have the sexy part, the renewable energy, the hydrogen, and all those things, let them under small areas, and then the technical issues will not be. And when we don't see it for what it is, the most important aspect of renewable energy is that it is much more expensive than the existing energy forms for mega. For me, not for small project, for mega. When you're going to talk about 100, I mean, from 10 megawatts to 100 megawatts and all that, is not anyway cheaper. So those are the things that need to be considered. And once we look at it for what it is, you want a home, you want 5 kilowatts, you want 10 kilowatts, you want 7.5 kilowatts, renewable energy is okay. And it will last for a certain period and which you will now use to, and then you will change it. So once we put our focus there, we'll be fine. But once we change our focus on national policy, that's a recipe for disaster. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Labadi, for that. And on that note, I want to get our final take. So I know Prof was about responding to that same question. So you can also use that to wrap up as your final take for this session. Then also hear final takes from Mr. Labadi. So Prof, okay, please go ahead.
Well, thank you. My final take is that, well, I think we started doing the right thing in this sector. Aggregating all the views out there of experts, of industry players, of the media, of the government side, of the investors, of the regulators to get things done correctly in the power sector. It is still essential for us to look at our competitive advantages, as I've mentioned. Most Nigerians, talking of in terms of the size, most Nigerians need energy for basic things, a few units of electricity, their fans and what have you. So for those ones that have not been having sufficient electricity, government may look in the direction of renewables, cheaper options. For industrial concerns, we need to scale up gas production and look in the direction of mini hydros. And again, we need to redo what has been done for the existing players to make the sector liquid and attractive to investors. Even if it's renewable, we need serious-minded investors. If it's hydro, if it's gas-fired plant, and whatever options, we need to look in that direction. And government will need to demonstrate sincerity of purpose to get on board private sector players under PPP models that work. And there should be incentive for them to get on board. Government should regulate the tariff structure. There are Nigerians who can afford to pay slightly more. Industries and comfortable Nigerians who can afford to pay slightly more for electricity if the service is available. What Nigerians don't want to pay for is darkness. And I say on a final note, if you have electricity for whatever option, please pay. It is criminal to consume electricity and not pay. It is illegal to get Nigerians to pay for electricity not consumed. On that note, I certainly thank you for the opportunity. I wish you the very best. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor. Okay. Mr. Labadi, please, your final takes.
An international commodity. So it's power. And the most important commodity in the world. Because wherever you are, you probably put on the light and got somewhere. And all those things require the notion that energy has no cost is at the root of our challenges of the energy sector. And that is why, for me, if there's fact that we as a people need to understand no electricity, I think that would be our take. It is our responsibility. We should ask the regulator. We should ask TCN, how much does it take to produce? And when we get that, we can now improve the quality of our discussions as a people.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Alabode. I'm sure for everyone who has joined this session, we've learned a lot of things. We need to scale up gas production, consider other options apart from gas. What Nigeria cannot pay for is darkness. I particularly love that. The consumers also need to ask the right questions, which is a function of our understanding of what is also going on. So we need to also be interested in whatever is going on in the power sector. And on that note, I would invite Juade Ahimir to please go ahead with the closing remarks as we wrap up the session.
Thank you, Samuel. It's always a pleasure listening to our guests and Professor Yomi Oke and Mr. Labode. Thank you very much. Having been in the power sector at the beginning, I truly understand, a number of the issues that you have dealt with. And I think when I started my presentation with that first PowerPoint saying that power is not cheap, you've just alluded to all the things I said in terms of power not being cheap. Like Mr. Labode said, there are two aspects to power. There's a commercial aspect and there's a social aspect. And until we bring those two things together, I don't think Nigeria will be moving in the right direction. I read somewhere yesterday that Tanzania had to shut down some of its hydro power generating plants because they were producing too much power. Too much energy was in the system, and but you can't waste energy. Once it's produced, it's either consumed or it's wasted. Thank you very much for your time, for taking your Saturday to speak to our audience. Thank you, Samuel, for anchoring this show. Prof, thank you so much for breaking it down into simple, for simple understanding. Mr. Labode, thank you so much for sharing the perspective of those who are in the business, who are actually trying to make money and putting money into it. Remember to join us on our Twitter Spaces every Tuesday, X Spaces, sorry, on every Tuesday and Thursdays at 6 p.m. Follow the money with Ugo Dre every Monday on Classic FM at 97.3 at 8 a.m. where we talk about capital markets. And I do think that we should start to focus on a number of the power companies trying to get into the capital markets towards unlocking those potentials for Nigerians who want to invest in the power sector. Join us also on Lagos Talks 91.3 FM every Wednesday as we speak to financial literacy on everyday money matters. Until next month, also we'll be having our macroeconomic masterclass next month, May 9th and 10th. If you're interested, you can go onto our website, look at the details, make a payment, and join the class. Until next month, when we hold another industry outlook. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Samuel, for hosting. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Mr. Labode, for your time. And God bless everyone. Have a great weekend.